Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of the Season in Review series. This will be our last episode before we dive into more off-season content on the channel. Today's team that we will be focusing on is the Tennessee Volunteers, who went 10-2, one of the more impressive SEC teams out there. Got slaughtered in the college football playoff. We will address that. But overall, it was a great season for the Volunteers. In today's video, we will be grading out every single position on the field for Tennessee. We will talk about the highs and the lows of the season, and then at the end of the video, I will give some improvements that I think can be made in order for Tennessee to have more success in this upcoming year of 2025, upcoming season, of 2025. So with that being said, let's dive right in. So we're going to start this off by I'm giving my overall thoughts on the season. This is not an all-inclusive list, but these are just some things that really stood out to me, that this was in a very impressive season for the Volunteers. You beat several marquee opponents. We will discuss that later in the video. And it was just a really overall great season. It was a down year for the SEC in a way, but it was still a very tough slate for the Volunteers to go through the gauntlet of the SEC, and they came out on top in large part because they were a very balanced and well-rounded team. As you can see there on that third point, they ran and passed the ball very effectively. Their defense was good against both the run and the pass. There was no weakness on this team. Yes, there were places where it was lacking a little bit, but there really was no certified weakness on this team, if you guys know what I'm saying. And then obviously the tough draw in the college football playoff with Ohio State, just running into a buzzsaw, after Ohio State got beat by Michigan. They came out with their hair on fire, and it turned out no one was going to be stopping that team as they went and won the national title. So it was a very tough draw in the college football playoff. But those are my overall thoughts on the season. Okay, so now we will be getting into my positional grades. We'll start with the offense, work our way to the defense, and then every grade overall will be put together at the end of this segment. Okay, coaching, I gave an A minus. It was really good overall. Really had no complaints. It wasn't an elite offense, which is why I didn't get the A grade for coaching, but it was still a very decent offense, which I think warrants an A minus. At quarterback, I have a B, so that's a little bit above average here with Nico Iamaleava. He was okay for the most part throughout the season. He was a good game manager, and he did what he needed to do. He did what he needed to do. He had a 63.8 completion percentage, threw for over 2,600 yards, had 19 touchdowns, and limited the interceptions to 5. So they played him pretty conservatively, but in the end, he did play it pretty well. But was nowhere near an elite quarterback this year. Obviously, he has the talent to do that in the next upcoming years, but just going based off of the results, I think he was a B quarterback. At running back, we have an A here. This was really it was a no-brainer for me. You have Dylan Sampson out there rushing for 1,491 yards, no-brainer. And then Deshaun Bishop, the second-string running back, had 455 yards on top of that. So you combine those together, just those two guys, and you have over 1,900 yards on the ground. And then Dylan Sampson had 22 touchdowns on top of that. So there you go. It was just a really good running back room. Okay, at wide receiver, it was a B. I was really expecting a little bit more out of this wide receiver core. You had Dante Thornton as your number one receiver in terms of yardage. He had 661 yards as the number one guy having the most yards. And then Brew McCoy and Squirrel White were 2 and 3. Chris Brazzell the second as number 4, just for whatever reason there. Brew McCoy had 472 yards, and Squirrel White had 381 yards. For the type of talent that these guys have, I was expecting a bit more in production, if I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. Brew McCoy is slated to go in the NFL draft, probably a later round pick. Squirrel White transferred to Florida State. So I think that both of those guys have a tremendous talent, but it just wasn't quite where it needed to be, in my opinion. Excuse me. Now at tight end, also about a B. You had two solid tight ends. Your number one was Miles Kittlesman, who had 300 yards receiving and 4 touchdowns, and he was a decent blocking tight end as well. So we have a B there. On the offensive line, I gave it an A minus. This offensive line was pretty darn good, as you have several NFL guys coming out of this offensive line, like John Campbell Jr. at tackle, Javontes Spraggins at guard, and Cooper Mays at center. All three of these guys will probably be NFL players. So I thought that this offensive line played really well. Okay, so now we go to the defensive side of the ball. With the coaching, I gave it an A minus as well. Defensive line was an A because a lot of it revolved around James Pierce Jr. He's going to go in the first round, probably a top 15, top 12, top 10 pick, somewhere around that range. He had 7.5 sacks on the season, but again, he was, I think, one of the most double teamed players in the country, one of the most held players in the country. So that also contributed to that fact. Omar Noman-Lott came in second in sacks on the team with 4, and he was very good at the defensive line position. Jackson Moy, Dominic Bailey, Tyree West, they were all good players on that defensive line. They all had pretty good sack numbers. So I give the defensive line an A. Okay, so the linebackers I gave a B plus grade to. I thought that they were pretty good myself, with the number one linebacker being Arian Carter, who had 68 combined tackles, 29 solo, 39 assisted, and 7 tackles for loss and an interception. On top of that, he was pretty good. He wasn't an elite linebacker by any means, but he was still very solid. Jeremiah Talander was number 2. He had 43 tackles and 4 tackles for loss and half a sack as well. So it was an okay room. It wasn't anything to write home about, but they still did their job very well. Okay, so the corners I gave a B plus grade to as well. Their number one corner being Jermon McCoy. He had 4 interceptions, 44 total tackles, and 1 tackle for loss. He was pretty good. Boo Carter out of the slot was pretty good. He had 38 total tackles, 3 TFLs, a sack, and an interception on top of that. And then Ricky Gibson the third, was off and on. He had 2 tackles for loss and 30 plus combined tackles as well. It was an overall, it was a good corner room. It played up to their expectations, in my opinion, and to my expectations of it, and it played pretty solid. And then the safeties as well, with Jacoby Thomas and Andre Turntine played well. Andre Turntine had a lot of tackles. So overall, this was a pretty good defense. Okay, so now you can see my overall grades for this team as a whole. On the coaching side of things, I gave it a B plus, offense A minus, defense A minus, special teams a B grade, and then overall team grade of an A minus. I grade coaching and special teams a little bit more differently than the offense and the defense. The offense and the defense obviously being the the main point of the team. So special teams obviously does not get graded on the same scale as defense. So everything averages out to an A minus B plus type of team grade overall. It was a very decent season for the Volunteers. Before we move on really quick, I would like to encourage you guys and encourage Volunteer fans, especially as we need to grow our fan base of outside teams such as the Tennessee Volunteers, to subscribe. It would be great if you could subscribe, follow the channel as well, and click the notification bell so that you get alerted when more Volunteers stuff gets put out there, as I will be doing a lot of stuff over the off season. I don't take breaks. It's just straight content all throughout the year. Okay, so now we move into my next segment here, the highs of the season. Number one was making the college football playoff. You haven't done it since the college football playoff started, and you finally got there. Yes, it was a big loss to Ohio State. We'll get to that in the lows of the season. But overall, making the college football playoff is a huge accomplishment for this team. And then a top 10 defense. This team was ranked top 10 in most metrics, according to, again, most stats. They were a top 10 defense overall. That's just a great spot to be in. And then your signature wins, beating Bama at home, NC State, which ended up being a really decent win, and then Florida, which ended up being a decent win as well in overtime. All right, now the lows of the season here. We have to get this out of the way. This is a segment I do for every single team. Yes, I critique a lot in this segment, but it has to be done. The college football playoff blowout. It was very embarrassing as a program for Tennessee. Yes, as I said in the previous segment, it was great that they made the college football playoff, but going out there, no shirts on in sub-zero temperature, acting like you're the tougher team, and then getting just absolutely blown out. Really, Ohio State was sending a message to a lot of people and SEC teams in general. You don't mess with the cold up north, and you don't mess with the north as well. Just overall, but yeah, it was just really embarrassing for Tennessee specifically. And then Nico did struggle, especially in that college football playoff game. But overall, he did struggle a bit. Didn't really let loose like I thought that he should have. Maybe that was more of a schematic thing, but yes, he did struggle at times, and that was ultimately what led to them being bounced in the first round of the college football playoff and then losing to Georgia and Arkansas, especially that Arkansas loss, really bad loss. Okay, so now here are my improvements for uh next season. I'm look improvements that I'm looking for next season. Excuse me. Nico Iamaliava improving just in general. I think that that should be the number one priority because there isn't a whole lot more that needs to be done with this team. You already have a top 10 defense. You already have a really good offense and offensive scheme. You have guys coming in like David Sanders Jr., who will probably start as a true freshman because yes, he is that good. But anyway, I digress. Nico Iamaliava is a guy that's going to be just in. He has one of the best talents out of high school that we've ever seen. But in order to harness that, he needs to just let it loose a little bit. And I thought that they really didn't do enough of that. Again, they had a really good running game, but that does not take away from the fact that they could have let it loose a bunch more than they did this past year. And I think that they can still do that. And then taking that the next step, I say that with a lot of programs in general. You took a big step this year from going from a 9-3 team to a double-digit win team and a college football playoff team. Now take that next step. Be that team that's going to make it to the SEC championship team. Make it, win it a game in the college football playoff. Take that next step. All right, that's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to subscribe, click the like button, comment your thoughts down below. Really quick, I love it when people comment down below. Uh, College football fans are some of the smartest fans out there, and I think that, and I respond to every single comment, by the way, and I think that we can have a really good time in the comment section, debating things back and forth, whether you agree with me, disagree with me, whether you disagree amongst yourselves. I think it's a great forum for talking about college football, obviously the best sport in just in general. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.